Hello. So I wanted to know how did your live action experiences influence the way you directed animation?
Well, influenced is more the other way around. When I did Incredibles, Tom Cruise saw it and really liked it and liked the way the staging was in the movie, and asked me to come over to his house, and we talked about movies for about 3 hours of all the stuff that we love, and he said, if you're ever interested in making a live action movie, I'd love to make one with you. And sure enough, a few years later we wound up doing Mission Impossible. And he made his stunt team look at the action sequences from Incredibles and Iron Giant, and so he felt, the thing that I loved was that he didn't see them as separate things. He saw it like good staging and animation can work as good staging in live action, and you know, he was more evolved than most studios at that point, that I think that would have been a little more hesitant to give me that kind of shot on such a giant film as Ghost Protocol was. So in terms of what influenced from live action, I would say I watch the clock a little more closely because money flies out quicker in live action. Anytime you tell any story, whether it's live action or animation, you get a little more experience. But I always feel like I'm kind of lost. And you have some perspective
some
about
big
that?
insight into that. Yeah, I think that Brad's live action experience has helped him to be quicker to cut things and get off something that's not
Kill darlings.
Kill darlings. It's like we would have explored things a little bit longer in past years. That now it's like it's not working. It's gone.
It's dead.
And that ruthlessness is, I think, a result of a couple of live action films.
Well, one thing we brought from live action is a fight coordinator named Rob Alonzo, and he had a background from school in animation, but he'd gone on to be a fight coordinator in live action, and he coached our animators and our camera people on how to stage this key fight scene that's in the middle of the movie.
Well, it's not staging, it's more how would you approach this fight if you couldn't use your eyes. And he would talk about strategy. And you haven't seen the film yet, but there's a fight that she has where she can't...
Some of you have, right?
Yeah, we have.
Some
Yeah,
have, all right. So there's a fight between Helen and Screenslaver where she can't open her eyes. And he said, you know, one of the things that you would do is you would get into a corner so that you limit the area you can be attacked from. And so she leaps up into the corner of a room, and that's the kind of thing that Rob was really helpful for. He talked about fight strategy, and he's versed in many different styles of fighting. So I worked with him on Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and then Tomorrowland. And we were talking on the set of both of those films about animation, and he'd studied animation in college, and he always loved it. And I said, well, you know, this might work. We could, you know, use some good fight strategy in film. And so he was surprised and delighted to come in and help us with that. Sure. Oh, am I deciding? Okay. You'll be next. Yeah.
Thanks. Hi, well, the movie was fantastic.
Oh,
It was
thanks.
great to finally see it. And I have a two-part question. The first question was, why the cookie for Jack Jack? Why the number one cookie?
Why not a croissant? Yeah.
And the second part is mostly for the three of you. Are there many parts you had to cut, like put less supers in the movie or less action scenes or anything?
The second part, the cookie, is like cookies. Kids love cookies. We understand. We all speak cookie, I think. So there's no deep answer to that. In terms of cutting,
We threatened cutting, but we didn't do it.
no, I don't have enough distance from the movie to give you as good of an answer as you deserve. All I know is I wrote a lot of stuff and I didn't use it. And you know, I bumped into the dark. I bumped around in the dark more on this film than any film I've done, and it was because there was a year taken off our production schedule. So if something didn't serve the main story of the role switch of Bob and Helen, it just had to be killed in its crib.
I mean, there were different endings, there were different kinds of
But
stories,
there were
really.
different beginnings. There were
Yeah.
there were new characters that I was interested in.
They're different stories in a way than what we ended up with, as opposed to there being some gem that we
Yeah,
couldn't
right.
put in there.
In other words, we had it all figured out from the get-go. It went like clockwork.
Yeah, no, it was. I probably wrote 2.5 other movies worth of scenes. There is no movie, but there are lots of scenes about a lot of different directions to go, and that's why I get a little crazy now when somebody goes, "We didn't have enough of this character." And I'm just going, "Ah! You don't understand. You know, I killed millions of characters. I destroyed cities worth of good ideas. You know, and you're complaining about one character. Get out of here right now." You know, I mean, I'm really like this. In 6 months, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm a little crazy.
It's a little raw right now.
Yeah.
The movie hasn't even opened yet. You
No,
know?
but we just barely got it together, and we were trying desperately to you know, you have high expectations, which is one thing. You know, people writing on the internet, you better not disappoint me. You know, and it's like, oh great, that makes me really want to make a movie. And then we have a year less time on our schedule, and we don't want it to be one iota less than what people expect from Pixar, which is a high standard. So where that time comes out is you can't reflect on any ideas. You have to just, if they don't work, they're dead, and next, and it was crazy, you know. But we made it, and I think that it looks really good. So hopefully the trick will work, and people will believe we knew what we were doing. You know?
Our relief is very fresh.
Yeah. Yes, and
Yeah.
you.
So you're mostly focusing on relationship between parents and of course Jack. But what about Violet and Dashiell? Because they're a little bit out of focus, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
We have 17 scenes in cover. We got it right here.
I would disagree with you about Violet.
But at the end, they're actually the one who saved everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
We don't want to tell the audience that, though.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be a surprise.
What the point for the teenagers who are actually lost in contemporary world, what they can see in your movie, what they can learn? 'Cause
Well, I think that Violet has a very significant role in this movie, more significant than in The Incredibles. And I think that if you look at both films, you can see an arc where she is very critical of herself, very insecure and defensive, like a lot of teenagers are, because you're between childhood and adulthood, and you're not really either at that point. And so you're kind of lost in trying to find yourself, and that's something that everyone has to go through. And so I think that there is a message of you know, aligning yourself with the right ideas, and not to say that there's one way of thinking, but something that works for you, something that you can believe in. You know, be the person that you would want to believe in. You know, there's a line from Iron Giant that I wrote, like, you are who you choose to be. And that means that any circumstance that you're born into, that's not you. You choose who you want to be, and then become that, but because you act like that person at first, you're not that person, but in acting like that person over and over again, you become that person. I was inspired by Cary Grant, who was a Cockney in London, and thought, you know, England is a very class-conscious society, and he was a Cockney, and he said, I don't want to be that. I want to be a debonair guy who kind of is, has a sense of humor about himself, and he willed himself to become Cary Grant. And after a while, he was Cary Grant, because he made those decisions over and over again to be that person. You may want to be a smaller person, a person who's jealous or petty or whatever. That may be what you feel. But if you choose to be something better than that, over and over again, that will start to become who you are. So I think Violet chooses a person who she wants to hide behind her hair in the beginning of the first movie, and as she develops and starts to get some sense of herself, she starts coming out. And I think in this movie she's more out, and she's more assured of herself. And still there are challenges, but she finds her way through that. And so I think that would be a message that I could get behind. Yeah. Sure.
Since you said that you threw away a lot of stuff,
Yes.
Could you reply to my question with the voice of Edna? Are you going to make...
No, Edna does not cooperate at all. I try to get her, I'll talk to you anytime, but Edna just doesn't do press.
You don't want.
Yeah, you don't
She shows up. I'm telling you, this thing is going to go south really fast.
Yeah.
She's going to insult every single one of you.
I can tell you what I think she might say, but only she can speak for herself.
Are you going to make an incredible trip?
That is just like coming into a maternity ward when somebody has spent 2 days in labor and saying, how about that next kid?
Maybe twins this time.
Maybe twins this time. So I think that's, I'll answer that at some really later date.
Has the animation changed between those two films? Has the medium evolved in some way?
Everything's gotten much easier, and the equipment is better, the artists are more experienced, and we've, you know, since the first movie, there's a bunch of young people that have come in from all over the world who saw the first movie in the theater, and they got to join our team on this, and they did a marvelous job. So everything, we were on the edge of failing the entire time we made the first movie. And now, you know, the technical stuff is figured out. The stories remain hard. And that's true whether you're making a movie that costs $10 or $200 million. You know, stories are hard. Yes?
Yes, so my question, there is lot and lots of superhero movies are very common today.
Yes.
So how did you try to make Incredible 2 different from the other superhero movies? And another question, second part, would you be interested?
Hey, you guys are doing a lot of these two-part things. It's actually 2 questions.
But it's related actually, because would you be interested to make a live action?
First question.
No.
Sorry, go ahead.
So the first question is, how did you try to make Incredible 2 different from other superhero movies? And second, if you can also answer, would you be interested to make a live action superhero movie?
Oh, live action. I'll start with the second one because that's the one I just heard. I've been offered live action superhero movies. Several of them became very successful, probably because I wasn't involved. But when it came time to think about it, I thought, well, if I'm going to do a superhero movie, I'd rather do my own superheroes than somebody else's. So, and that was another reason to do an Incredibles 2.
The thing that distinguishes this film.
Oh, it's the same thing, I think, that distinguished the first film, is that primarily it's a story about a family that has superhero seasoning on it rather than about superheroes. Yeah, so that, I think we felt confident in that is our area, and families are infinitely interesting to go into. Yeah.
Why is story so hard?
Why? Oh, wait a second, this guy. Have you asked a question yet?
Yes.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Okay. Why are they hard?
Yeah.
Story is, should look like it's spontaneous. It should be logical in retrospect. You should not know where a story is going, but once the story has gotten there, it should make sense to you. It makes sense with the personalities involved and the decisions that they made. It's very hard to be both logical and unpredictable. So that's, I think, in a simple answer, that's why it's so hard.
And then you add the time frame to it, and it becomes that much more difficult. We were doing it so quickly, and we were actually making the film in pieces as he was writing the story.
More like Ratatouille, yeah.
And we were trying to pick the pieces that we thought were going to stick. And then sometimes they would change, and then we had to throw some stuff out that was a little further along than we would have liked.
It'll be on the Blu-ray.
Yeah. It'll all get used.
Yeah. Yes.
Could you talk about your collaboration with Michael Giacchino on the
Oh, yeah.
soundtrack?
Well, the first Incredibles was Michael's first film score, and we just hit it off immediately and started talking about the music to Johnny Quest, and I remember he knew it really well and knew that Hoyt Curtin did it, and it was kind of like it instantly felt like he was the kid from 2 houses down that I played with when I was young, and we just, our points of view on what works in movies, we disagree about some things, but he just felt like I'd known him forever, and I have huge respect for his abilities. When I got in a ton of CDs, which tells you how long ago it was, of different composers' work, what separated Michael from a lot of them is he could do any style of music and do it emotionally and make it his own. He could do something that sounded like World War II. He could do something that was jazz inflected. He could do a space kind of thing. You know, he did a score for a Disney short of Goofy, that how to make a home theater, and he studied the music of the original Goofies and was able to make a modern one that sounded like it was done back then, and yet was an original score. It was in the flavor of, but it absolutely could have been in a real Disney film, and people just aren't that good, and so I try to stay very close to him and tell him my next 3 ideas so that he, you know, I'm locked in, that no one else can get it, you know, for that period or that period. So hopefully we'll both have long lives and we'll get to do a lot of projects together. But he's already going to do the next one I want to do, so he's in for the next one. Yes.
Whatever that is.
What's the next?
Yeah.
We have time for one more question?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Oh,
there he
wait,
is.
you hasn't been
Yeah.
asked one yet.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Sorry.
My English is not perfect, sorry.
It's okay, my French is non-existent.
You're way ahead.
Okay, sorry the question. What are you voicing the character in the mod? It's okay. It's the original idea, the character voice. What is it?
What is the origin of the character voice for Edna Mode?
Yes,
For
yes.
Edna?
Yeah, yes.
Well, it started out as trying to figure out who she was, and I thought, well, she should be half German and half Japanese. And people say, why half German, half Japanese? Yes. And I knew it was you! I could feel it right in my why? Yeah, I could feel it. They're 2 relatively small countries that have very big influence. They're technologically advanced, the best cameras and cars, until Tesla, are German and Japanese. You know, the best lenses are German and Japanese lenses. You know, I'm into cameras, and the best cameras are Leica and Nikon and Canon and, you know, Hasselblad, and you know, I mean, those are all. So they're small countries that have big voices, and that's kind of what she is. She comes into a room and she's tiny, and yet superheroes like start cowering when she comes into a room. She just has this feeling of taking over a room, and so I thought, so I kind of blended accents between German and Japanese, and they kind of come in and out, you know, in a weird way.
When we try to describe that to actresses that we tried to get, you know, well, what do you want? You go, well, we want this mixture of German and Japanese, and they go, nobody knows what that means. Nobody knows how to do that. And then Brad would do E, and they'd go, oh, okay, and then they try to imitate it, and it was like, oh, man, this is crazy. Just do it, because we're trying to, you know,
get an actual actress
Yeah,
to do it.
to imitate him, this is good.
But he knew exactly what he wanted and it was great.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very